Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining this spontaneous fireside. My name is Kirolis Riyad, and I lead the Waste Not Want Not initiative at Concordia University in Montreal, Canada. And today I'm joined by Annelies, who is a formal Waste Not ambassador and is currently a youth ambassador with One in Belgium. She's interested in foreign policy, gender equality, and security. And she's currently at COP26 in Glasgow and has kindly agreed to report on what she's witnessing on the ground over there. Before we start, I would like to highlight two quick goals of this firesides. The first goal is to better connect our distant yet like-minded communities. The second goal is to learn from one another. So please join our conversation by sharing your questions or comments in the comment section, and by all means, talk to one another. This fireside is spontaneous and will be short and sweet, so that Annalise can go back to providing the youth perspective and the important conversations taking place at Glasgow. But I'll keep an eye on your questions and comments, and we'll be responding to it in real time. I would like also to encourage you to write in the comments your message to world leaders on the climate crisis. Now, without further ado, thank you so much, Annalise, for doing this, and welcome back to Waste Not, albeit only virtually. So, what are you seeing at COP? How are things going?
You're seeing a lot at COP. There's so many events going on. There's so many people talking. The venue is huge, which means that you're walking from one part to another. My feet hurt at the end of the day. But to go into more detail of what's going on, for example, right now I'm in the action zone where a lot of the media is happening. So if you see something going on in news, most likely it's been filmed here. Then we also have a zone called the Pavilion, where a lot of your country delegations get together to speak about what they're trying to do, as well as many NGOs and organizations, private companies, to talk about what they're working on, and then just having conversations with people, and also creating side events to promote certain conversations, like everything related to climate change, everything related to green tourism, for example. And of course, I think the biggest thing I can mention that's happening is that what you see on the news and what's actually happening at COP are like two completely different worlds. Of course, we have leaders giving all these big fancy speeches, and it sounds great. But then when you listen to the activists, and especially the young activists here at COP26, their demands are not being heard. Their voices are not being heard. And I could go on and on about some of the examples where a lot of youth activists, especially Black youth activists, and for minority groups, are not given access to discussions, are not given access to the negotiations. Sometimes are able to access the venue, even though they have the proper documents and everything. So it's just that's the biggest thing I can get from right now is that the voices of the youth are still not heard when it's actually our future that we need to talk about and that we're trying to ensure a sustainable future.
I was muted. Yeah, no, I was. That's what I was also watching, and this is what I was hearing also from like December, who's talking a lot about what's happening outside of COP, and trying to get people to go there. And I think she's organizing two strikes already, like in just a couple of days. Um, I'm actually curious. I don't know if you've watched Justin Trudeau's speech by any chance. What did you think?
Unfortunately, I didn't because I've been watching a lot of the other ones, for example, from Jeff Bezos and Biden and Prince Charles and everything. But I can only assume, having lived in Canada and have heard Justin Trudeau's speeches before, that it was probably very diplomatic and political. But I
Yeah.
also want to add that it's probably very greenwashed by that saying that he's saying what people want to hear, but then when it actually comes to listening to the demands of the people, of the indigenous communities especially, I'm sure that a lot is still being overlooked, and that in Canada, well, I say we because I still consider myself sort of part of Canada, but that we are still overlooking the indigenous communities, especially because they have the knowledge, they have the years and years of experience from one generation to another that they are still overlooking. And the reason I'm also saying this with a bit of confidence is because I attended a panel, like an open dialogue, yesterday to talk about the position of the indigenous communities and peoples in the climate conversation. And I can vouch for every person that was there that every panelist mentioned that you are still not listening to us, you are not acknowledging our knowledge, and you're not using it to
Mhm.
your advantage. of decision making process. Um, so I can just imagine that it was something similar to all of the world leader speeches.
Yeah. I'm wondering, is this your first time you attend these kind of negotiations? And maybe if you would reflect on your experience a little bit, what is your advice to the people trying to drive positive systemic change?
But for me, it's definitely the first time I'm attending something like this, especially the COP26 or any COP in general, as well as any other big negotiation conference or event. And that's why I mentioned that it was very overwhelming and exhausting previously to you because there's so much on, and it is very demanding to only listen to talk to people. And even then, I'm still very privileged to be here. I do want to acknowledge that. And the thing is that sometimes there's so much going on, and you're talking to so many people that you might think that you're not bringing anything to the table or anything to the conversation. Um, to a lot of people say, even if you feel like you're not still there, then not doing anything. Nonetheless, it's still a big difference. What happens at CUcompost is we actually the decision make in life are choices.
I think you might be cutting off a little bit, Annelies. This sometimes happen with the network connections, especially when there are a lot of people in the same place. Um, I will just wait for Annelies to come back. Welcome back.
Okay, are we back? Hi. I'm sorry. I think it's because everyone's using the Wi-Fi, so of course it's a bit spotty. So I apologize for that.
No. I remember the last time there was
Uh,
the global strike in Montreal. We actually crashed the network system. So the Wi-Fi and the cell phone network actually crashed in Montreal at the time. So I can imagine it's a similar story now with COP. Anyways, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt, but maybe you can go back to reflecting on your experience being there.
yeah, no, of course. I don't know what cut off, but I'm just gonna continue by saying that I'm joining the two strikes on Friday and on Saturday because
Mhm.
I think it's important to experience both sides. So the negotiation and decision making part of it all, but also actually the activism on the ground, and especially being there for all the young youth activists, especially because their voices are not being heard inside of COP. And that's what I mean when referring that every decision that we make here as individuals, they're not going to matter if we don't bring that outside of COP. So if we stop like after 2 weeks, it's just we're going back to our normal selves. That's not going to change anything. So that's what I'm getting from is like every decision is not just today; it's every single day.
Yeah, yeah, and I like that your perspective is coming from the fact that you have been already an activist for quite a while, including with one and it's at Waste Not when you're volunteering with us, um, and just getting that sort of background and going to these kind of formal negotiations. Um, I think those reflections are very valuable. Um, so my next question is, what is your message to the world leaders on the climate crisis? What do you want them to know? I mean, you are probably in a better position to tell them face to face, I guess. But
Well,
what's your
you would
message?
you would actually. I mean, you would be surprised that unfortunately we're not getting close to the leaders because of security reasons. You
Right.
can talk to ministers and high officials, but not to the world leaders,
Mhm.
which is it was the reality. I didn't expect to see Biden or uh, my prime minister, who also came yesterday,
Mhm.
Alexander De Croo. I didn't expect to shake hands with him or bump into like going from the washroom, whatever. But it doesn't change the fact that we can still talk to a lot of partners, that we can still talk to a lot of high representatives, ministers, and to the media, which is also very important. Um, But one thing that I definitely would want world leaders to know is, and this is again coming from being a young activist working in an organization that is composed by youth activists, is that they need to listen to us. There are so many young activists who know what they're talking about, who are already more educated for their age than the world leaders were probably at their age when it comes to climate change, when it comes to what's happening in the world, and most importantly is listening to the groups. So Black young activists, Indigenous communities, women of color, because those are the groups that will continuously get more and more impacted by the climate crisis. And I guess also a big part, which what I've noticed in a lot of conversations, is the intersectionality perspective of it. So that's something from my feminist side that I would want to say to the world leaders, is to not forget that everything's interconnected, everything's linked. So you can't talk about climate change without talking about racism or gender, or like social inequalities or COVID in this instance, because there is a COVID apartheid, there's vaccine apartheid, the fact that the global south wasn't able to join. These things need to be considered. And previously, I was attending a dialogue on tourism, but none of the panelists talked about education, how to make the education within tourism more sustainable. And if you know from my background, I got a degree in hotel management. I worked in hospitality for 4 years, and I never got to experience tourism. And that for me is very important.
So you mentioned education, and sorry, I'm going to go off track for a little second, but it is one of those topics that I feel very strongly about. I actually just wrote an op-ed in the Gazette calling for a national plan in education in Canada and calling on institutions, universities, and post-secondary institutions to commit to teaching all of their students about the sustainability and the climate crisis. And I was wondering what role do you see educational institutions playing in that? And I mean, you reflect a little bit on your degree in hotel management, but I guess maybe you can also talk about your poli sci degree. And one of the things you mentioned that stuck out to me is that many of the activists uh, that are joining you, they're already much more educated than the world leader on the climate crisis. So how can we do a better job at having more of those people who are educated?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a great question. I think you can link that to any conversation here. You can also link that how can we make the conversation about racism more within our educational systems, about sexism, about consent, and all these things. And it's just, to be completely brutally honest, it's just talking about it and starting from a very young age, not waiting until you're in your 20s or your 30s to talk about climate change or any other topic that's relevant in today's issues. So starting like at a very young age, like kindergarten, just it doesn't have to be overly complicated. It could just be simple as how to compost properly. That's you can, especially with kids, you can make a game out of it, and then they can apply it at home. Or you can make workshops. You can, especially when they're this young, you can make activities around it. So it's also entertaining, and that they change their mentality around this is normal. Because now, if you look at people, especially at COP, you wouldn't believe how many people still have plastic bottles, or that they go get their coffee, but they always get a cup. They don't even use a recyclable mug. And that's things I learned from you. I have my cups, my reusable cups with me. I even brought Tupperware so I didn't have to buy lunch and try to reduce my waste as much as possible. But those are things that I learned because that's what I wanted to do, and because I got involved into organizations like Waste Not and whatnot. But this also comes with education, and it also starts from home, and it starts at a very young age. So that's my first point, because if you educate people to normalize it, they're not even going to think about it. So if you start very young, it's just going to continue older. It's just going to become normal for them to bring a reusable cup, to bring a water bottle, to bring bags for the groceries, to maybe not fly as often, maybe take the train, or maybe think, oh wait, I can bring my own utensils instead of trying to get something in plastic, like little things like that. But that starts from first acknowledging if you're making, yourself, I'm doing something wrong, and then educating it. And I think a lot of people, and this I'm very generalizing, of course, but I think a lot of people just forget that it's just you need to normalize it, and
Mhm.
people forget it's actually just a small step to make a big change.
Yeah, and I think there's I mean, there's one way to look at education as a vehicle to drive behavior change, but also it's a way to equip people with the tools they need to fight the climate crisis within their careers. So, as an engineer working at the company, what are the tools I need to know to make sure that the product or a service or whatever from that company is more sustainable? And same thing for diplomats and so many different careers. Um, so the last thing I want to ask, and you know this because I'm very nosy. How can you tell us a little bit about your work with one? What's kind of the issues that are you working on? Yeah, I've been
Yeah, of
watching this
course.
tech industry for a little while, so you know, I had to ask.
No, I'm glad you're asking because I mean, of course, the one campaign is still it's a global movement to end preventable diseases and extreme poverty by 2030. And there's a lot of offices in Europe, the US, and even in Africa. So a lot of collaborations are being done between these continents to advance those goals. However, the one campaign has noticed more and more that, and again, it goes go back to my previous comments how everything is interconnected, is that we cannot tackle poverty and preventable diseases if we don't talk about climate change because every those topics are also connected. So if we work on one, we have to work on the other and combine them. So and also these views are my own. And before the one campaign wasn't in any way kind of advocating for climate change, but now they are going to work on that, and I'm excited to be part of that new step in the journey of one campaign to tackle climate change. But to answer your question of what we'll be doing, because like it kind of varies in the years. As you know, we were all hit by the pandemic. So the last year, the one campaign's focus was on vaccine equity, making sure that the vaccines are shared with everyone, but especially recovering countries countries from the global south. So so I have a focus, of course, on Africa, but we were trying to expand it more and more to different regions as well, such as Brazil, such countries in Asia. So that was our biggest, is talking to MEPs to push for more funding for COVAX, to talk to MEPs to share the surplus doses that we have in Europe to other countries, and to make sure that the countries that do get the vaccines have the facilities to maintain the vaccines and the proper infrastructures to give them to the population. Because I can give you an example right now in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, only 0.03% of the country is vaccinated. And if you compare that to the Flemish side in Belgium, which are almost 90 or 80% fully vaccinated, and people are already getting their third dose, their booster shot, as they call them. Some countries in Africa haven't even gotten their first one. And of course, there's this whole conversation about vaccine hesitancy, but that's a different topic
Yeah,
because that comes back to education and that comes back to culture and everything. But topic, and that's a different point. But it still doesn't change the fact that in order to go back to how we were living before, we need to make sure that everyone gets as much as possible gets vaccinated.
okay. I think we're gonna wait for a couple of seconds for Annelies to come back. I think you kind of cut off a little bit, but I think we've heard all you said about the vaccines and the vaccine hesitancy and it was actually quite fascinating for me to read about this.
Now,
Yes, I can sort of hear you. I heard your question. Okay, now you're back. Can you hear me? Okay, Annelies, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay,
Um,
I am sorry about
well,
that.
it's not you. But no, I was just reflecting on the vaccine problem because it's such a big problem. Like I come from Egypt as well, and I talk to my families there, and there is such a low percentage of people that are vaccinated in there. Big part of it is access, but also another part of it is hesitancy, and I feel like even the hesitancy is coming from the fact that people watch a lot of the media coming out of the states, and because of all the fuss around vaccines in there, it's just translating into making putting doubts in a lot of people's minds there. The other thing is, like, I was fascinated to read about like the extent to which rich countries are sort of, in a way, not just are they not providing sufficient funds and so on, but they're even preventing poor countries from buying, even if they can afford it, because they want the supply to come to them first. It's just a shocking sort of thing to watch, and see what's happening. And I'm very glad that you're advocating for this, along with one, and I think there's a big global movement around it, and I hope we can fix it and change it, because at the end of the day, you're gonna end up with more variants, and then you start over. Um, yeah,
Yeah, no, definitely, and it still creates a very big inequality in the world because in our parts, like different parts of the world, we're almost back to normal.
yeah,
But people are starting to travel and things like that. But in other countries, they might not even be able to work. They might still be working from home. They are still saying goodbye to loved ones. And for us, it's past, if I can say that, because going back to the fact that COP26 is happening, with thousands of people, and then still having that inequality of some people not being able to attend, the people that actually should be here are not able to come, just shows the big gap that we still have in this world between the advanced countries and the countries that are still being left behind.
yeah. No, I agree. Well, thank you so much again for doing this. It's been so nice to see you again after so long, and thank you again
Definitely.
for doing this. And enjoy the rest of the conference. And thank you so much for all the advocacy work you're doing there, um, and throughout your
I'm
activism.
so happy. And yeah, and I just a quick anecdote for you. There is like a little explanation about how to compost here, so I thought I wanted to share that with you. So they are advocating for proper composting, and also raising awareness about it here. So
That makes me
I
very
thought you
happy. Thank you for sharing that.